In the vast, rolling hills where the wild grasses whispered secrets to the wind, there stood a sturdy ranch carved from the earth by calloused hands and unyielding will. Its owner, Elias, was a man forged by solitude, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of endless days tending cattle under the relentless sun, mending fences that stretched like veins across the land, and rising before dawn to milk cows whose warm udders filled buckets with life-giving cream. His face, weathered by years of wind and worry, hid eyes that burned with a quiet fire, for deep in his chest lingered the ache of a family lost to fever long ago, a wife and child taken too soon, leaving him to wander his acres like a shadow among the living. One golden afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in hues of amber and fire, Elias rode his faithful horse along the edge of his boundary woods. The air hummed with the chirp of hidden birds, and the scent of pine mingled with the earthy promise of rain. It was there, in a small clearing where sunlight pierced the canopy like spears of light, that he first beheld her. She knelt upon the mossy ground, her simple woolen dress clinging to her slender form, faded from too many washes in cold streams. Her hair, dark as midnight rivers, fell in loose waves over shoulders that bore the invisible burden of endless striving. Beside her huddled two small children, a boy no taller than a shepherd's crook and a girl with braids like twisted vines, their faces smudged with dirt, their eyes wide with the hunger that gnaws at the young like a thief in the night. The woman, Mira, though Elias did not yet know her name, was breaking a heel of stale bread into tiny morsels, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed them into the children's eager palms. They nibbled like frightened sparrows, crumbs dusting their laps, their thin ribs visible beneath threadbare tunics. She murmured soft words to them, promises of better tomorrows woven from the threadbare cloth of hope, her voice a gentle melody against the rustle of leaves. Elias reined in his horse at a distance, hidden by the thick trunk of an ancient oak, his heart clenching like a fist around a stone. He had seen want before, in the hollow cheeks of travelers passing through harsh winters, but this sight struck deeper, stirring something primal within him, a fierce urge to shield, to provide, to fill the voids that life had carved into her world. Without a sound, he dismounted, his boots sinking silently into the soft earth. From his saddlebag, he drew forth a sturdy woven basket, its contents a bounty from his own table, loaves of crusty bread still warm from the hearth, wheels of golden cheese veined with cream, clusters of ripe apples blushing red as a maiden's cheek, and thick woolen blankets dyed the color of harvest fields. He added a small jar of fresh honey, golden and thick, and a handful of wild carrots pulled that very morning from his garden soil. Each item he placed with care, his large hands surprisingly tender, as if handling fragile eggs. Then, heart pounding like a war drum, he crept forward on foot, leaving the basket at the clearing's edge, just within her sight, before retreating to the shadows. Myra's head lifted suddenly, her keen eyes catching the glint of the basket's handle in the fading light. She rose slowly, one arm shielding her children, her body tense as a bowstring. The boy and girl peered out, curiosity battling fear, as she approached the gift. Her fingers brushed the bread first, and a gasp escaped her lips, soft, warm, fragrant with yeast and hearth smoke. Tears welled in her eyes, tracing clean paths down her dust-streaked cheeks, for in that moment, the weight of endless scraping seemed to lift, if only a little. She knelt again, tearing the loaf and passing pieces to Ben and Lila, their small mouths filling with the miracle of fullness. The cheese followed, creamy and rich on their tongues, the apples crunching sweetly, the blankets wrapping around their shivering forms like arms of comfort. Elias watched from afar, his breath shallow, a strange heat blooming in his veins as he took in her grace, the way her dress hugged the swell of her hips when she bent, the gentle rise and fall of her breasts with each grateful breath. He knew not her name, nor she his face, but in that silent exchange, a thread of fate had been spun. Mounting his horse, he turned away, the rhythm of hooves fading into the twilight, leaving no trace but the basket's quiet abundance. Mira sat long into the dusk, feeding her children until their bellies rounded with contentment, her own hunger sated not just by food, but by the whisper of kindness from an unseen hand. As stars pricked the velvet sky, she gathered her little ones and slipped back to her humble cottage, the blankets bundled close, her mind alight with wonder. That night, in the dim flicker of a tallow candle, Mira lay upon her straw pallet, the children's soft snores a lullaby beside her. The day's gift lingered in her thoughts, warming her from within like mulled wine. Her hand drifted absently over her body, tracing the curve of her neck, the fullness of her breast, down to the soft mound between her thighs. A forbidden ache stirred there, wet and insistent, born of isolation too long endured. She imagined the stranger's form, tall, strong, hands that could cradle or claim. Her fingers pressed deeper, circling the sensitive bud that swelled under her touch, breaths quickening as waves of pleasure built, crashing through her in silent shudders. Release came fierce and sweet, leaving her slick and spent, whispering thanks to the shadows for the basket and the spark it had unknowingly kindled. Little did she know, across the hills, Elias tossed in his wide bed, his own body rigid with unspent need, visions of her hungry eyes haunting his dreams, promising paths yet to cross. Several days passed like the slow turn of seasons in those wooded hills, each dawn breaking with Mira rising early to tend her meager plot, the gifted basket's contents sustaining her family through lean mornings. The blankets warded off the night's chill, and the memory of that unseen generosity wrapped around her heart tighter than any wool. Gratitude burned within her, a flame that demanded she seek its source, for a woman alone with young ones could not abide debts unspoken. On the fourth morn, with the air crisp and laced with the scent of dew-kissed ferns, Mira gathered Ben and Lila, filling their own small basket with wild berries and a sprig of lavender from her windowsill. "We go to the woods," she told them softly, "to say thanks proper to the kind soul who fed us." The children nodded, their cheeks fuller now, eyes bright with adventure, clutching her skirts as they trudged the familiar path to the clearing. The sun climbed high, dappling the ground in shifting patterns, when Mira knelt once more in that sacred spot, arranging her humble offering on the very earth where the stranger's basket had appeared. Ben chased butterflies, his laughter echoing like bells, while Lila wove daisy chains, her tiny fingers nimble. Mira whispered prayers to the wind, her voice carrying pleas for the giver's health and plenty. Time stretched, and doubt crept in, perhaps he would never return, but then, from the rustling underbrush, came the steady clip-clop of hooves. Myra's pulse quickened, her skin prickling as if brushed by invisible fingers. Out rode Elias upon his bay stallion, his leather vest stretched taut over a chest broad as an oak barrel, trousers molded to powerful thighs from years astride. He feigned surprise, reining in with a nod, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Good day to you, miss. These woods see few folk, what brings you here?" Mira stood, smoothing her dress over curves softened by recent nourishment, her cheeks flushing beneath his steady gaze. "A gift left me in this very place," she replied, her words simple and true, gesturing to her berries. "Bread and cheese and more, enough to fill my children's bellies. I came to thank the one who left it, though his face I never saw." Elias dismounted, his boots thudding solidly, towering over her yet moving with a gentleness that belied his size. He accepted a berry, its juice staining his lips crimson, and they spoke as strangers easing into familiarity. She shared her tale, a husband claimed by the river's cruel current 2 winters past, leaving her farm barren, crops withered by drought, forcing her to woods and scraps. Ben and Lila drew near, shy at first, then bold, petting the horse's velvet nose under Elias's watchful eye. Trust flickered like a candle in draughty hall as Elias offered milk from his herd, warm and frothy in a flask from his saddle. "Drink," he urged, and Mira did, the cream sliding rich down her throat, pooling warmth in her belly. They sat upon a fallen log by the babbling stream, waters clear as glass tumbling over smooth stones. The children splashed at the edges, their giggles a symphony, while Mira and Elias talked of lands and labors, his cattle grazing vast meadows, her lost fields now overgrown with thistles. Their hands brushed as he passed the flask, rough calluses meeting soft palm, and fire raced through Myra's veins. She felt it low in her core, a throbbing heat that dampened her thighs, her nipples tightening against the fabric of her bodice like ripe berries straining for touch. Elias sensed it too, his breeches growing tight against the swelling length of his manhood, visions of peeling away her dress to taste her skin flooding his mind. He spoke of lonely nights on the ranch, the echo of empty rooms, and she confessed the terror of wolves howling close to her door. Hours slipped by, the sun arcing westward, until Lila yawned and Ben rubbed weary eyes. Elias rose, offering his horses back. "Let me carry you homeward, at least to the wood's edge," he said, and Mira nodded, trust budding like spring crocuses. She lifted Lila before him, Ben clinging to the mane, while she walked beside, her hand occasionally grazing his knee. Each touch ignited sparks, her imagining his fingers parting her legs, stroking the slick folds that ached for him, he picturing her on her knees, lips parting to take his hardness deep. At the path's fork, he dismounted, helping her children down with arms like iron bands, his breath hot on her neck. "Come to my ranch tomorrow," he murmured. "Fresh milk, bread straight from the oven. For you all." Myra's heart swelled, her body alive with yearning she dared not name. She watched him right away, the play of muscles under his shirt searing her memory. That evening, back in her cottage, as Ben and Lila slurped goat's milk and devoured berry-stained bread she'd saved, Myra's thoughts wandered to Elias's strong form. Alone after tucking them in, she shed her dress, lying naked on her pallet, the cool air teasing her fevered skin. Her hands roamed freely now, one cupping her heavy breast, pinching the peak until it throbbed, the other delving between her thighs where wetness slicked her fingers. She circled her swollen pearl, hips bucking as pleasure coiled tight, whispering his imagined name into the dark. Climax tore through her, juices flowing hot, leaving her gasping, body arched in bliss. Across the hills, Elias stabled his horse, stripped bare in his lamplit room, fist wrapped around his thick shaft, stroking furiously to thoughts of Myra's parted lips and quivering form, seed spilling in ropes as he groaned her secret beauty. Dawn of the next day found Mira resolute, packing a small bundle as Elias had bid. The children skipped ahead, the promise of ranch wonders lighting their steps. Elias waited at his gate, a table laden under the apple arbor, pitchers of milk, platters of cheese and bread, bowls of stewed plums from his orchard. They ate in the shade, laughter flowing freer, Ben asking of horses, Lila petting barn cats with fluffy tails. Myra's eyes met Elias's over the children's heads, a silent vow passing between them, trust earned, desire kindled, the first threads of unexpected love weaving tight. As the sun waned, he walked them partway home, his presence a shield against the gathering dusk, both aching for the day when hands would claim what eyes already coveted. As the days unfolded like petals in the warm embrace of summer, the bond between Elias and Mira deepened, rooted in shared glances and stolen moments amid the woods and streams. Elias's ranch became a beacon, drawing Mira and her children with the pull of a lodestone, each visit layering trust upon trust like bricks in a sturdy wall. He taught Ben to toss hay to the horses, the boy's small hands growing stronger under guidance, while Lila gathered eggs from clucking hens, her basket filling with speckled treasures. Mira watched it all with a heart swelling fuller than her pantry ever had, the specter of hunger fading like morning mist. Elias never pressed, never named the fire that simmered between them, but his eyes devoured her, the sway of her hips as she carried water, the beads of sweat tracing paths down her neck into the valley of her cleavage. One eve, as harvest moon rose fat and golden, Elias extended the invitation that sealed their fates. "Stay the night," he said plainly, after a day of mending his fence line where Mira wielded hammer beside him, her laughter ringing as nails bit true. Storm brews on the horizon, roads turn to mud. The children need warm beds, and you, rest. Mira hesitated only a breath, her body humming with the nearness of him, then nodded. Ben and Lila cheered, dashing to the barn to bed down with fresh straw and tales of adventure. The ranch house welcomed them, its hearth roaring with logs Elias split himself, casting flickering shadows on walls hung with woven rugs and iron tools. Supper steamed on the oaken table, butter-drenched cornbread, venison roasted with herbs from the wild, potatoes dug from black earth, and milk foaming in mugs. They ate as family, stories flowing, Elias recounting boyhood chases after wild ponies, Mira weaving legends of river spirits her mother told, the children hanging on every word until eyelids drooped heavy. With bellies full and cheeks flushed, Elias carried Lila to a pallet in the loft, her head lolling against his shoulder, while Mira led Ben by hand to another, tucking blankets with kisses. The house fell quiet, save the crackle of dying embers and the distant rumble of thunder rolling in from distant peaks. Elias found Mira in the kitchen, scrubbing pots by lantern light, her dress damp from splashes, clinging to the generous swell of her breasts and the roundness of her rear. He stepped close, the air thick with unspoken want, his hand covering hers on the rag. "Leave it," he murmured, voice gravel rough. She turned, lips parting, and in that instant, trust bloomed into flame. His mouth claimed hers, fierce and hungry, tongue sweeping in to taste the sweetness of stewed fruit lingering there. Mira melted against him, her arms winding around his neck, body pressing full to his hardness. They stumbled to his chamber, door clicking shut like a vow, the storm outside mirroring the tempest within. Elias's hands roamed her back, cupping her buttocks to lift her against him, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist. He bore her to the wide bed piled with furs, laying her down as if she were spun glass, yet his kisses turned ravenous, nipping her earlobe, sucking the tender skin of her throat until she arched and moaned. Myra's fingers clawed at his shirt, yanking it free to reveal a chest matted with dark curls, muscles rippling like forged steel. She traced every ridge, nails scraping lightly, drawing growls from deep in his throat. He unlaced her bodice with trembling urgency, peeling it away to bare her breasts, heavy orbs tipped with dark peaks stiff as pebbles. His mouth descended, tongue swirling one nipple while fingers pinched the other, tugging and rolling until Mira arrived, her core flooding with slick heat that soaked her underlinen. "Please," she gasped, voice breaking, hands fumbling at his belt. Elias obliged, shucking trousers to free his manhood, thick as her wrist, veined and throbbing, capped with a glistening head. Myra's eyes widened, hunger mirroring his, and she reached for it, fingers encircling the shaft, stroking from root to tip with a rhythm born of instinct. He groaned, hips bucking, pre-cum beating to slick her palm. But he pulled back gently, kneeling between her spread thighs, hiking her skirts to her waist. The sight of her there, dark curls framing plump folds glistening with need, nearly undid him. "So beautiful," he breathed, parting her with thumbs to expose the pink pearl above her entrance. His finger traced it slow, then delved inside her tight channel, finding her walls clenching hot and wet. Mira bucked, crying out as he added a second finger, curling to stroke that secret spot within, thumb circling her bud relentlessly. Pleasure built like a gathering storm, her hips grinding against his hand, breasts heaving with ragged breaths. Elias watched her face contort in ecstasy, her juices coating his fingers as she shattered, body convulsing, walls pulsing in waves that milked him dry of restraint. She slumped, panting, but he was far from done. Rising, he positioned his cock at her entrance, rubbing the head through her slickness, teasing until she begged anew. With a thrust, he sheathed himself to the hilt, her cry of fullness echoing as he stretched her wide. He moved slow at first, savoring the velvet grip, then faster, hips snapping with primal force, balls slapping her skin. Mira met every plunge, nails raking his back, legs locked around him as fire coiled tight once more. They peaked together, his seed erupting deep in hot spurts, her climax milking every drop as thunder crashed overhead. Spent, they collapsed entwined, sweat-slick skin cooling in the aftermath. Elias held her close, whispering promises into her hair, "I'll care for you, for them, as my own blood. Always." Mira nestled against his heart, trust absolute, the first fruits of their passion sealing a love unexpected and profound. Outside, rain lashed the earth, washing clean the path to tomorrow, while within, the ranch pulsed with the rhythm of a family reborn. Ben and Lila slumbered unaware, dreaming of horses and eggs, as Mira drifted to sleep in arms that vowed eternal shelter. Elias lay wakeful long, stroking her hip, already yearning for dawn's light to bring more of her fire. In the wake of that stormy night of passion, the ranch transformed into a haven woven from threads of newfound kinship, where the boundaries between stranger and family blurred like mist at noonday. Mira and her children took up abode in the sturdy house, their humble cottage abandoned to the weeds, for Elias's arms and acres offered shelter deeper than any roof of thatch. Days blended into a rhythm of labor and laughter, Ben shadowing Elias at first light to drive calves from meadow to barn, learning the nudge of a stick and the low call that coaxed them home, Lila tending the kitchen garden, her small hands patting soil around bean vines and pulling radishes fat as fingers, while Mira churned butter in the cool dairy, her laughter mingling with the splash of cream turning golden. Elias watched her always, his chest tight with a joy he thought lost forever, the sight of her bending to hang wash, dress pulling taut over full breasts and rounded hips, stirring his blood to fever pitch. Trust flourished unchecked, watered by small acts, Elias carving whistles from willow for the children, Mira mending his torn shirts with stitches fine as spider silk, their evenings filled with tales by the hearth, Ben and Lila clambering onto knees to hear of ancient heroes slaying beasts in far valleys. The children blossomed, cheeks rounding plump, voices piping Papa Elias without prompt, the words slipping natural as breath. Myra's heart overflowed, seeing her little ones claim a father in this man whose quiet strength anchored their world. Yet beneath the domestic peace simmered the erotic undercurrent of their nights, touches lingering longer, glances heavy with promise. Elias would steal kisses in the barn, his hand slipping under her skirt to cup her mound, fingers dipping briefly into her eternal wetness, leaving her breathless and aching as chores called them apart. One tempestuous night, as autumn winds howled like mournful wolves and rain hammered the shutters, the dam of restraint shattered utterly. The children, tucked early into their loft beds with hot stones at their feet, slumbered deep under layers of quilts. Elias found Mira in the main room, her nightshift loose and thin, firelight dancing across her skin like lovers' caresses. He swept her into his arms without word, carrying her to the grand bed heaped with pelts from hunts of yore, bear and deer, soft as sin. Laying her upon them, he stripped her bare with deliberate hunger, the shift whispering to the floor to reveal her body in full glory, breasts heavy and pendulous, nipples darkening to peaks under his stare, belly soft with womanly curve, thighs parting to show the dark thatch guarding her slick treasure. Mira shivered not from cold, but anticipation, her hands tugging at his clothes until he stood nude, cock jutting proud and rigid, veins pulsing with need. He descended upon her like a conqueror, mouth claiming one breast fully, lips sealing around the nipple, tongue lashing fierce while teeth grazed the edge, sucking hard enough to draw milk-sweet moans from her throat. His hand kneaded the other globe, fingers twisting the tip until it throbbed red and swollen. Mira arched, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as fire shot straight to her core, juices welling unbidden. Elias trailed kisses downward, nipping her ribs, tonguing her navel, until he knelt between her splayed legs. Parting her folds with thumbs, he inhaled her musky scent, then dove in, tongue flat and broad lapping from entrance to pearl, circling the swollen nub with devilish precision. Mira bucked wildly, heels digging into the furs, cries echoing as he speared inside her channel, fucking her with his tongue while fingers rubbed her bud relentless. Pleasure crested sharp, she shattered, thighs clamping his head, nectar flooding his mouth in pulsing waves. Undone but insatiable, Mira pushed him back, eyes wild with lust. She straddled his chest, trailing kisses down his torso, tongue swirling his nipples to elicit guttural groans. Lower still, she nuzzled his groin, inhaling his earthy maleness before parting lips to engulf his cock head. Inch by thick inch she took him, hollowing cheeks to suckle deep, tongue tracing the underside vein while hand pumped the base. Elias's hips jerked, hands fisting the furs, growls turning to please as saliva slicked his length, balls drawing tight. She hummed around him, vibrations sending shocks through his core, until he hauled her up, positioning her above his straining rod. Mira sank down slow, impaling herself fully, inner walls stretching around his girth with a burn that bloomed to bliss. She rode him fierce, breasts bouncing hypnotic, hands braced on his chest as she ground her pearl against his base. Elias gripped her hips, thrusting upward to meet her descent, the slap of flesh on flesh drowning the storm's roar. He flipped them suddenly, pinning her beneath, knees hooked over his elbows to plunge deeper, battering her depths with savage rhythm. Mira clawed his back, leaving red trails, her voice a litany of harder, more as another peak loomed. He reached between, thumb mashing her pearl, and they tumbled over together, her cunt spasming vice-like, milking his eruption, hot jets painting her womb as bodies locked in shuddering release. They collapsed, slick and sated, limbs entwined, breaths mingling in the afterglow. Elias kissed her brow, her lips, murmuring, "You are mine, Mira, and I yours, forever, with the children as our blood." She clung to him, whispering love's vow, their union forging a family unbreakable. Thus passed weeks of such nights, passion's fire banked by day but roaring free after dusk, trust the mortar binding their erotic blaze. Ben and Lila thrived in the glow, calling the ranch home, unaware of the adult's secret symphonies. Elias's first basket faded to legend unspoken, its magic alive in the love that bloomed unexpected, roots delving deep into soil enriched by sweat and seed. As the wheel of the year turned and winter's first frost began to sparkle like diamond dust upon the wide meadows, a new and quiet joy settled over the ranch. The house, once a place of echoes and shadows, now hummed with the steady pulse of a life fully lived, filled with the sense of baking bread, pine smoke, and the earthy warmth of family. Ben and Lila had grown tall and strong, their faces brown from the sun and their hands quick to help with the daily chores that kept the ranch thriving. Ben walked beside Elias with a proud stride, learning how to track the stray cows through the brush and how to read the clouds to know when a blizzard was brewing, while Lila sat by the hearth with Mira, sewing small garments and singing songs that made the rafters ring with sweetness. They were a family not by blood, but by a bond forged in the fire of kindness and trust, a truth that Elias cherished every time he looked at the children who now called him Papa. One crisp morning, as the sun struggled to climb over the frozen hills, Mira pulled Elias aside in the quiet of the dairy, her eyes glowing with a secret light that made his heart skip a beat. She took his large, scarred hand and pressed it firmly against the soft curve of her belly, where a new life had begun to stir. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She was carrying his child, a gift of their wild nights and deep love, a tiny spark that would grow to join their happy circle. Elias felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it brought tears to his eyes, and he gathered her into his arms, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He thought back to that first day in the woods, to the basket he had left without a word, never dreaming that such a simple act would lead to a bounty so great. Their secret start remained their foundation, a quiet memory of a time when hunger was their only guest, now replaced by the endless plenty of their shared life. But even as their family grew, the fire between Elias and Mira burned hotter than ever, a flame that no winter chill could touch. That night, after the children were tucked deep into their beds and the house was silent save for the popping of the logs in the fireplace, Elias led Mira to their big bed, his hands trembling with a hunger that never seemed to fade. He stripped her bare in the golden glow of the fire, his eyes tracing the new softness of her body, the way her breasts had become even fuller and her nipples darker and more sensitive. He knelt before her, his mouth exploring the satin skin of her thighs, breathing in her musk as he used his tongue to tease the wet folds of her womanhood. Mira cried out softly, her fingers digging into his shoulders as he lapped at her dripping center, his tongue flicking against the hard little pearl that brought her so much bliss. She could not wait for him any longer and pulled him up, her hands fumbling to free his thick, throbbing rod from his trousers. It sprang forth, dark and heavy, and she took it into her mouth with a moan of greed, her tongue swirling around the crown as she tasted the salt and heat of him. Elias groaned, his head falling back as she sucked him deep, her hair falling over his lap like a silken curtain. When he could bear no more, he pushed her back onto the furs, her legs spreading wide to welcome him home. He entered her with one smooth, powerful thrust, filling her so completely that she gasped, her inner walls clenching around his girth in a tight, hot hug. They moved together with a rhythm they knew by heart, a dance of skin and sweat, his weight pressing her into the mattress as he drove deep, his balls slapping against her as she wrapped her legs around his waist to pull him even further inside. The heat in the room seemed to rise as they neared the edge, their breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Elias watched her face, the way her eyes rolled back and her lips parted in a silent plea for release. He reached down, his thumb finding her swollen nub and rubbing it hard as he continued to plunge into her wetness. The explosion came suddenly, a wave of fire that started in their loins and crashed through their entire bodies. Myra's channel spasmed around him, milking every drop of his hot seed as he erupted deep within her, filling her with the promise of more life. They lay there for a long time afterward, their hearts beating as one, the trust they had built acting as a blanket that kept the world at bay. They had found everything they ever needed in the arms of one another, a love that was as unexpected as it was perfect. As the stars watched over the ranch and the fire burned down to glowing coals, Elias whispered into Myra's ear that he would never let her go, and she answered him with a kiss that tasted of forever. Their story was a testament to the power of a single kind act, a reminder that even in a harsh world, love can bloom in the most unlikely places. If you have enjoyed this journey through the hills and heartstrings of Elias and Mira, and if you want to see more stories of deep trust, found family, and the steamier side of romance, please subscribe to follow along. There are many more tales yet to be told, each one filled with the same heat and heart that brought this family together, and we would love for you to be a part of every chapter that follows. Your support helps these stories grow, just like the love on the ranch, so hit that button and join us for the next adventure.